everyone, it's Dion from Pink Whisper Designs. Today we're going to take a closer look at the Tim Holtz Distress Spritzes. This is bundle number 2. And what you want to do is make sure you mix these up really well. You can see that pearlized pigment at the bottom. So this pearlized pigment is in a clear fluid base. And I'll show you some swatches of this as we go along. There's 12 new colors. And this is the first one, Saltwater Taffy. There's Kitsch Flamingo, Fired Brick, Seedless Preserves, Prize Ribbon, Cracked Pistachio, Mowed Lawn, Crushed Olive, Antique Linen, Vintage Photo, Rusty Hinge, and Tumbled Glass. So you get a nice collection of colors. But I also want to show you what bundle 1 looked like. So really quickly, this was bundle 1, and these are the swatches from that. And I'll grab some of the bundle 2 colors just so you can kind of see the differences here. So if we're trying to kind of look for a match, you have colors that are nicely in between the colors that were in that bundle number 1. And there is a bundle number 3 currently out, which we will take a closer look at in a future video. But for right now, I just wanted to show you 1 and 2 kind of in contrast to one another. So let's set those aside and start on our tags. I've got 2 mixed media tags from Tim Holtz, and I'm going to grab some paper. These are from the Backdrops Christmas 2024 collection. I just grabbed quite a few. I wasn't sure which ones I wanted, but I did decide to go with these 2 that have the text on them. So what I'm going to do is just select the areas of these papers that I want to use on my tag, and then I'm just with a pencil going to trace out these tags, and then I'll use my scissors. You can use your paper trimmer just to trim away any excess. So let's trace out this second one, and then what I'm going to do is remove that little reinforcer on each of the tags just so our papers will lay nice and flat. I applied some Nuvo Deluxe adhesive to the back of each of these, and then we'll glue them together. And then I've got a 1/4 inch hole punch to punch that hole right back into each of these tags. So once that was done, I decided to add a little ink around the edges. So I've got the Tim Holtz Distress Oxide ink in Antique Linen, and I've got the mini blending applicators. So what I'm going to do is just add a little bit of color all the way around. I'm coming in on the tag just a little bit, maybe about a 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch. I want to leave that center area the lightest. I did that for both tags, and then I grabbed the Vintage Photo Distress Oxide ink, and I'm really just going to try to go around the edges. So I'm lifting up the tag and just applying that ink around the edges. And then once I've done that, I'm just going to do a little bit of blending into that antique linen. I didn't add any more ink to that little applicator. I'm just using what's on there and blending that together. And then off camera, I took the Tim Holtz Stampers Anonymous Sketch Greenery, and I stamped that onto the tags. I've got some holly and berries, and then some other greenery on there, and I stamped it in the 2 corners. You might want to check out that set. Again, I will list and link that down below for you as well as on my blog. So let's use the Crushed Olive, Antique Linen, and Fired Brick Distress Spritzes, which are in the bundle number 2. And again, you want to make sure you shake these up really well. And then I'm just going to spray that right onto the tags. You do want to make sure, again, that you clean off that nozzle. When you're done using your spritzes, you want to make sure that they don't get clogged. And then for this one, for the Fired Brick, I'm going to just take that applicator and dip it into the liquid and then spatter it on. And that will give me a little bit different look. I'll have a little bit more control over the spattering, and I'll get some smaller spatters as well. So I did that for both of these tags. So I'll heat set that Fired Brick, and then the last color we're going to use is the Crushed Olive. I'm going to apply that the same way just by dipping that into the liquid, and then I'll spatter it onto the tags, and then I'll heat set this. And then we're going to grab the Tim Holtz Sizzix Thinlits Vault Holiday Classics die set. This is a brand new die set. You can see you have the poinsettia, the little pine cones, some greenery. This little bell is so cute. We're going to die cut that from the craft stock, the metallic in gold. And then we're going to die cut some of the greenery from the craft stock in the cool colors. And then for the poinsettia, I'm going to use some 100-pound Strathmore Bristol Smooth cardstock. We'll set aside the rest of these dies. We will come back to the sentiments in a little while. So let's go ahead and run these through the Sizzix Sidekick machine. And the little bell is a two-part. It's got the bottom layer and then a little overlay to give it some dimension. So what I've done is I've taken some fired brick Distress Spritz and put it onto my craft mat. And then I've got the Tim Holtz Distress Watercolor pencils. And I'm going to be using Barn Door and Fired Brick. I'm going to start with the lighter of those two colors. And I'll just kind of randomly color this in. I'm not being really fussy at all. I'm just going to quickly color this in. And then we're going to add a little bit of shadowing with that darker red. I'm going to start kind of at the base of the petal and also around the sides, just kind of around the edges of those petals, just to give it a little bit more interest and dimension. And again, I'm not being fussy, I'm just kind of filling in those areas because we're going to be coming over the top of it with the Distress Spritz, and that's going to give it a beautiful pearlized look. So I'm just going to dip my brush right into that and pick that up and paint it right over the top of each of these petals. And it will do a little bit of blending for me at the same time. And wait till you see, these are going to have a beautiful pearlized look to them. And look at that, it's just so pretty. It really blended out those pencils. And now while those are damp, I can easily kind of sculpt those petals a little bit with my fingers, just kind of rounding them up a little bit. And then it's a two-part piece for the poinsettia. So let's set those aside to dry completely. And in the meantime, I'm going to grab my Distress embossing pens and my embossing glaze. And this is one of the brand new colors. This is called Evergreen Bough. So what I'll do is take that embossing pen and just kind of color in around the tips of each of these branches. So that will add some embossing ink is what's in this pen. So it's adding a little bit of embossing ink, and then I'll sprinkle on that embossing glaze. I'll tap away any excess, and then we will heat set each of these. So let's do the same thing for this other little greenery. And I did that for all of these. I'm just going to sprinkle that on and set it aside. And then we can emboss all of these at the same time. And you'll see when I emboss these, you're going to get that beautiful shiny glaze over the top. I'll show you that a bit closer later on as well. So let's go ahead and heat set this one. And again, I did the rest of those the same way. So we can go ahead now that our little poinsettias are completely dry, and let's go ahead and glue these together. So there's a lot of dimension to these little poinsettias. I really love how these look. So now we have those glued together. Let's go ahead and assemble these onto our tags. For this first one, I'm going to put it in the upper right-hand corner. And I'm going to put a few of the little bits of greenery around it. Just kind of tucking it in underneath. And I am using that same Nouveau Deluxe adhesive to attach these. You can cut them down a little bit if you like. And then once I have that one done for this second one, I'm going to put the poinsettia in the lower left-hand corner. I just thought I'd switch it up a little bit. You could decide which way you like the best. I couldn't really decide, so I decided to do it both ways. And you can see some of that stamped greenery we have in the background. It's going to just fill in a little bit and just add a little bit more interest to the tags. And again, keep in mind that the Distress Spritzes, they don't react with one another or really react with water. It's mostly a clear liquid with that pearlized color in the liquid. And if you watch my first video, you see, I will link that below for you as well, but you will see what these look like on black cardstock. It's absolutely amazing. They really pop. They're very vibrant. And then let's take the Tim Holtz Stampers Anonymous Mini Layering Stencil set number 59. I'm going to grab this one here, but you get 3 really cute stencils. I love all 3 of them. But for today, I'm going to grab this one. And then I've got my texture paste. This is the opaque texture paste. So it'll have a nice white color to it. And I'm going to just apply that in a few random areas on my tag. Just using the Tim Holtz Distress palette knives to apply that to the tags. And then when you're done, you do want to make sure you clean off your stencil and your knife really well. You can just place it in some warm water and then make sure you rinse that off. So let's go ahead and do this second tag. And you can see I don't want it to be perfect. I'm just kind of randomly placing it on the tags, not filling in all the areas completely. And then you can just scrape that palette knife along the edges to remove any excess. And we can set those aside to dry. Now with the bleed-proof white ink from Doc P.H. Martin's, I'm going to apply some to my glass media mat. I've spritzed it with a little bit of water from my Distress sprayer, and we're going to spatter each of these tags to give it a little bit more of a snowy look. So while those are drying, I'm going to go ahead and die cut the sentiments. So I'm using that same green cardstock that we used earlier, and I've die cut the word peace and Noel from that same die set. I die cut 2 extras from some craft 100-pound cardstock, and I'm going to attach this green layer over the top. That will give us a little bit of thickness to this embellishment. And then we're going to add some glaze on these, but I'll set those aside to dry. And then I've got the Tim Holtz Idea-ology confections. So they're these little, they look like little candies. There's green and white stripes, red and white stripes. And I'm going to add a green one to each of the centers of my poinsettias. And then once these were completely dry, I went back to the sentiments and I'm patting on some Versamark Watermark ink pad. So this is an embossing ink, just like we used to apply the embossing glaze before onto those branches, only it was in a pen version. Now we're using the ink pad. We've just patted on plenty of that ink onto the top of each of these sentiments. We'll sprinkle on that embossing glaze, tap away the excess, and then we can go ahead and heat set these. Now, what I do want to say is you can add as many layers of this glaze as you like. So I didn't think this looked quite thick enough. So what I'm going to do is heat set these. I'll let them cool. You do want to let them cool a little bit before you apply your second layer of embossing. So we'll heat set those. I let those cool for a minute or two, and then we're going to do that same process. We're going to tap on some more of that embossing ink. I'm just pressing that ink pad right onto those sentiments, and then we'll sprinkle on some more glaze and we'll heat set these again. And as I said, you can do this as many times as you like. You can just build up layers of that glaze. But I thought 2 layers of it gave it a nice thick glaze over the top, and let me show you that up close. Let's do this second one. And then I'll give you a closer look. And that is just gorgeous. I love how this looks. And it still leaves the color of the paper behind, but just enhances it a little bit with that glaze. So I've got a couple of word chip sentiments. And these are from the Tim Holtz Idea-ology baseboards. This is Christmas 2024. I'm cutting them down a little bit. I want to kind of separate them on the tags and make them a little bit smaller so they fit exactly where I want them to. So I'm using my Holtz Titanium Shears to cut those down. They are really thick, so that's an easy way to cut these. I've got some archival ink from Ranger, and this one is called Potting Soil, and I'm just going to apply that around the edges. So this is a permanent ink, so it will dry permanently on these, and I just want to take away that cardboard look on the side of these little sentiments. Now I've got the Noel and Peace, and then I'm going to lay out my little word chips underneath, and then let's go ahead and use the Ranger Multi-Matte Medium and apply these to the tag. So we'll let those dry, and then I'm going to add some more greenery in the opposite corner from each of those poinsettias. And these you can sculpt a little bit with your fingers, and you can cut them down if they're a little bit too long. And then I'll go back to my Nuvo Deluxe adhesive and attach these. And again, all the products I'm using today are listed and linked down below, as well as on my blog. And you can see with the glaze, what's really pretty is it just gives a tint of color to whatever you're working on. So if you have stamped images underneath the glaze, it'll still show through. Your stamping will show through, your pattern papers will show through. It just adds a little tint of that color. So now I've got the Distress Rock Candy Glitter, and I thought these needed a little bit more glitter on them. So I'm going to take my Ranger Multi-Medium Matte. I've got a little small paintbrush, and I'm going to paint some of that glue on, and then I'll just put those right into that Distress Rock Candy Glitter. So I'm just going to place those down in there and pick up some of that glitter, and that's really going to give these a really sugary look. And then for the little peppermint sticks, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to apply that glue. You can just do one end at a time and then dunk it in. I'm just going to put some glue on one end and the other end, and then dunk it right into that glitter. And then I've got that brush, and I did decide to go back and do these two that I had already glued down to the tag. And I'll use my Nuvo dual tip spoon just to sprinkle that glitter on so it doesn't get all over the place. And then I'll just tap away any excess. And again, that's going to give these a really pretty kind of sugary look. And then I'll add these extra ones to the opposite side of the poinsettia on each of these tags. I'll do a red and green one on each. And then with these little peppermint sticks, I'm going to add those right underneath the sentiments. So while that's drying, let's go ahead and assemble our little jingle bells. I've got some small foam squares, and I'm going to pop up this little layering piece on the jingle bell. Just remove that backing, and then we can tape these two together. And once that was done, I'm going back to that Potting Soil archival ink, and I'm going to just kind of scrape it around the edges just to take away that white edge. And then where those two overlap, where that dimension is, I'll go back and just add a little ink there as well, just right along that edge. And that'll dry permanently on this metallic cardstock. Then I went back to that white ink and spattered these little jingle bells as well. So let's set those aside to dry. Now I've got the velvet trims from Tim Holtz in the cool colors. I'm going to grab one of those greens. I did decide to go with that more olivey green, that lighter one. So I cut a couple pieces of this, and we're going to fold it in half and slide it from front to back on each of the tags and create a little loop, and then we'll just take those two ends and thread those through that loop, and then just pull this nice and tight. I'll do that for both. And then for the jingle bell, I've got some red and white baker's twine, and I'm going to tie this onto that little knot at the top. So I'll just slide this through, and then we're going to tie a bow. I'm just using my pick tool just to kind of thread that through there. And then I'm going to tie a bow. But I did decide to not have these kind of move around, so I'm going to take a couple little foam squares, put them right on the back of that jingle bell, and tack that down. Just going to make it easier to tie this, and it'll stay in place nicely. We'll just trim away any excess. And again, I did that same thing for the other one. And let's take a closer look at the finished tags. And I just love how that Distress Spritz looks on top of those poinsettias. And there we just painted it on. We also sprayed some on our background and we spattered some on. So you can use these in a variety of different ways. And they're just really fun to play with, and there's some beautiful colors. And again, keep an eye out for that bundle number 3 that's coming soon. So if you enjoyed today's video, please hit the like button and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so that you don't miss a single video. Thanks so much for joining me today. I hope you all have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.